All right. Let's go. Week 10 college football underway earlier this week. If you're a Group of Five fan, Group of Five fans. To me, we don't start play until Saturday. We really have nothing to go on. We may check out the scoreboard. I have no idea who's playing tonight on a Friday night or on a Thursday night or before that, what we had going in regards to college football for week 10. But we're certainly going to run through the games for Saturday. We are going to look at some teams that are some extreme outliers as we approach week 10 and some interesting conversations there. We're certainly going to look at playoff scenarios and conference championship scenarios as well. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. I've left a link in the chat for the call-in line, of course. I've also left a link to my appearance earlier today on Clemson Football Live with Brian Knight. Brian is a remarkable guy. Appreciate him having me on today to discuss my new book, Disputed National Champions. And please check out the link in the description section of this video and all the videos. Right at the top, you see the link where you can check out this book on Amazon if you're a college football junkie like me. I'm telling you, it's a good read. Take you through the 1990s. It's not just a historical book, and we will talk about it at a later date. I'm not going to go through it right now. You may have heard me describe it on any number of shows and what we attempted and hopefully accomplished in writing this book. Again, tracking the 1990s, which I consider to be the most impactful decade in the history of college football, pertaining to the national championship, pertaining to the determination and the process of selecting a national champion. So we so much appreciate Brian and Clemson Football Live. And we had a fun time talking about not just the book, we talked really about the college football back in the 1990s and brought it ahead to today and what's going on right now with the playoff races underway, the conference championship races that obviously converge to a playoff race. And Adam, thank you so much for the super chat. We'll get right on that. We've got a call coming in, and we want to let everyone know that we will be here for an hour. If you would like us to be here longer, then we certainly will take your contributions. And Adam is sending us on our way there. So we will post the banner in regards to $100 for hour number 2 and so forth and so on. But we will be here for an hour at least to talk college football with all of you. The Amazon links in the description section of all the videos as well. I want to let you know that I'm going to be on Uncle Lou's Saturday show at approximately 10 in the morning. I don't know how much I'm going to have to offer at 10 o'clock in the morning. That's one of the reasons why I no longer do a morning show. That's not the main reason, but it's one of the periphery reasons. Not at my best at 10 in the morning, but we will do our best, and we appreciate Uncle Lou asking us on because I had reached out to him concerning the book, and he also responded. So we appreciate Uncle Lou, and we will talk some college football with him. I think I'm going to make some picks, I believe, and we're going to discuss the book and some other matters concerning college football, I would imagine. So again, we'll be on with Uncle Lou on Saturday morning, approximately 10 a.m. Eastern time. Here's Adam with, Mark, I read your book last night. It was outstanding. I'll take that. You're a talented writer, and the analysis and thoroughness are first rate. Thank you. Adam, thank you, because that's what we're looking for. We're looking for feedback and response on the book, because I don't want to sit here and tout it as the greatest thing since sliced bread. Of course, I would like for all of you to partake and to enjoy. And the main mission here was to say, I think this goes for a lot of various aspects of life. There are powers in place that tell us the way things are, the way things should be, the way things are structured, and who is the best, let's say. And do we necessarily need to just take that verbatim and not think about it, not process the information and the results? And that's what we're taking to this college football book, is that we're looking at each individual season, as we have throughout the history of college football, but focusing on the 1990s to say, okay, well, what were the results? What was the scheduling for each team? How did they perform? What were the records, the results, the other factors involved? And did we arrive at a clear-cut national champion? Or should there other things be considered, other teams, other situations? And so we lay it out from the preseason of each season to say, hey, this is the way it was setting up at the time. This is the way it looked. These were the favorites. These were the expected contenders for a championship. Then we take you through the season. We run through all the results, but we also take this fast forward into the BCS era and the 4-team, 12-team, and could be a 14-team college football playoff. So had a lot of fun writing the book. And Adam, thank you so much for that endorsement there. I would love it if you wrote a review and also rated the book online. All right, let's get to week 10 in college football. And before we do that, we will welcome in our first caller. We got the real MVP on the line.
Hey, Mark, how are you doing this evening?
I am doing very well. How are you?
Good, good. That's great to hear. I'm looking forward to this week's set of games because there's not a lot of great games on, which the last time there wasn't a lot of great games. There was just upsets everywhere. So I'm starting to get into that psyche of trying to figure out what teams are going to go down that we don't expect to go down.
Yeah, so let's look at that. So we start, of course, at noon, and I got to think about 80% of college football nation is going to be locked on Ohio State and Penn State. So regardless of who wins that game, it's not going to be a surprise, I don't think, to your typical college football fan. So that's not necessarily where we're going to find a surprise. Maybe we find one at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, where Duke was undervalued last week as a near 2-touchdown underdog at home in a game in which they were kicking a field goal on the last play of the game to win the game against SMU. They did lose by 1 point in overtime, but they have been largely undervalued and now are a 3-touchdown underdog at Miami. So there's a possibility for you. Arkansas, Ole Miss. Arkansas has played rather well with a win against Tennessee, of course, and played rather well against Texas A&M, only losing that game by 4. And they are a 7.5-point underdog against Ole Miss. So do you see anything there or elsewhere?
Well, I really like that Arkansas-Ole Miss game because I just don't understand the value of Ole Miss. They lost to a very bad Kentucky team and they lost to LSU, so I'm not as a believer in the hype. I still think there's some preseason expectation built into Ole Miss. Another game a little bit further down at noon that I think it could be a sneaky upset is Stanford at NC State. NC State is a 10-point favorite, and I just flat out believe this year NC State shouldn't be a 10-point favorite to anybody in the country. They've proven time and time again they're not a good football team. I mean, last week they beat Cal by 1 point, but that's because, Cal is Cal and they lose to everybody by 1 or 2 points, Mark. And I believe Stanford's shown some fight this year with beating Syracuse, whereas NC State has shown nothing of equivalence to that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So coming into the season, obviously NC State was considered a substantially better team than Stanford and has been. Stanford did have that game against Syracuse. And then soon after that game, their starting quarterback, Ashton Daniels, was kind of the scapegoat of overall awful play by the entire team. And he was benched. Now, see what happened last week in Stanford coming back was that he came off the bench and played well. And so Wake Forest won that game like 27-24, I believe. And Ashton Daniels came off the bench, played rather well. So now they're playing NC State. 10.5 points is pretty healthy. I think Vegas is going off of, there's a bit of a brand bias there, a recent brand bias, travel, and I don't know what other metrics are really involved in that analysis, but I would stay away from that myself. I do believe in the approach that if you're talking about just terrible football teams, then don't take anybody to cover a large point spread. And both of these teams have been rather awful. And you're right, Cal blew a 13-point lead in the fourth quarter and, of course, missed a field goal. Cal has missed more field goals to lose games this year. They could have won the game against NC State last week. Well, at least put themselves in a lead with like a minute left with a field goal. They missed a field goal with 90 seconds left against Pitt. They could have knocked off Pitt, 7-0 Pitt. They missed 3 field goals against Florida State. And if they would have made just one of those field goals, they would have been in position to kick a field goal at the end instead of having to go for a touchdown. They missed, I don't know what the number of kicks, but obviously blew that Miami game. And I think that there were some missed kicks involved there. Yeah, Cal is the unluckiest team in America, I believe, this year. I'm surprised that they're not holding kicking tryouts. But yeah, 10 points between awful teams might be too much.
All right. Another game, Mark, in which I can't have the line explained to me any rational way, which scares the absolute heck out of me, is North Carolina versus Florida State. Florida State's only a 2.5-point underdog, which they could literally be playing Presbyterian or some irrelevant school like that, and I would still say that's too much. I mean, Florida State is just horrendous, terrible, awful, no good. And for them to only be 2.5-point underdogs against literally anyone in the entire country and the entire FBS system makes no logical sense.
Well, North Carolina's been practically as bad.
There's no. There's no way they could be as. I know some of the wheels have fallen off, but they've shown signs of fight. I haven't seen no signs of fight in Florida State at any point this year. I mean, I watched that North Carolina Duke game, and North Carolina looks like they got some sort of a pulse. They got a quarterback that can throw the football. They can run the football a little bit, and on occasion, Florida State's just rolled over and died, Mark. I mean, they are just bleeding out and hoping that their recruiting class doesn't materialize away from them.
Okay, your thought process makes sense. Yeah, North Carolina, and they just completely annihilated and took apart Virginia last week, 41-14. So maybe they're catching their stride. Jacoby Criswell. Now, here's a transfer situation for you. He was the heir apparent to Sam Howell. You know, that seems like it was about 12 years ago. And he left. He went to Arkansas, couldn't get the job there. He's back in North Carolina. He needs an injury out of Max Johnson and poor play out of Connor Harrell, and he's the starting quarterback. But he's playing pretty well. And yes, they hung with Georgia Tech. They hung with Duke down to the wire, 21-20.
They hung with Pittsburgh. They only lost by 10.
Pardon me?
They hung with Pitt. They only lost to them by 10, and Pitt's
lost
a capable
Pitt by
team.
10. Florida State is only getting blown out by really good teams. Miami. The Clemson game was only a 13-point game. When they're playing bad teams, they're usually losing very close.
I got you, Mark. I don't need them to lose by 17, 14 points. I just need them to lose 24-21 and North Carolina covers.
Yeah, I hear you. I get your point. Again, I don't have a strong opinion on that game. They're bad football teams. Who's motivated? Who is going to catch a break? Who's going to play for something? Those motivating factors start to come into play at this point because the teams are so bad. Although I got to think North Carolina, are they 4-4? So they're playing for a bowl game.
That's correct.
Florida State is eliminated from bowl play.
Yes.
Already. Crazy.
And you can imagine that hostile environment North Carolina's going into with all 12 people that are going to that Florida State game, Mark. I mean, just going to be hostile environment.
Yeah, well, they've sanctioned off a large portion of the stadium because they're doing remodeling and reconstruction at the stadium. So at least they're gonna, it's like the old baseball stadiums, like at the Oakland Coliseum, where they would tarp off the upper deck to bring the people down to the lower bowl. So the 12 people will at least be sitting maybe in the same section.
That'd be nice. Another game, Mark, we're going really to the bottom of the barrel today, which is your favorite type of UMass versus Mississippi State, Mark. Mississippi State's only an 18.5-point favorite against UMass. Is UMass good this year, or decent, or something capable?
Well, let's
Because I
see.
know UMass has just been a joke forever. Or is Mississippi State really that atrocious?
They were early, no doubt, and largely still are, meaning Mississippi State, but they've shown a little bit of life recently. Although you got to think when Georgia and Texas only win those games by roughly 3 touchdowns, you got to figure that they're just sleepwalking through those games. There's UMass. They loaded up on the MAC schedule there. Well, I guess they have moved into the MAC, correct? Or are they still an independent?
I have no idea. I
think they moved into the MAC. I think that's why we have all those MAC games. That's right. I forgot about that. So they're playing in the MAC. Again, don't hold me to that, folks.
No, it says they're independent.
I'm sorry, what?
It says they're independent.
Okay, they're still independent. But they're playing 5 of their first 6 games against MAC teams, and they lost them all. Okay. They win against an FCS team, and they won against another FCS team, and they lost to Missouri by 42 points. Yes, this is just okay. When it comes to Connecticut, UConn, okay, they're a basketball school. They've had nominal success in football. 15 years ago, they had that nice little run in the Big East where they were going to bowl games, and then the one you might be able to win some kind of bar bet about them going to the Fiesta Bowl, going to an actual New Year's Six game in 2010. But okay, so there's been some life with Connecticut football at some point, but they're off the rails now, and they're insignificant, and they're independent. Now we've got UMass. Okay, one of the last independents. Like I just don't know what they're doing, what their vision is, what they believe to be the value of running a football program that's just going to kind of scrape together a schedule against whoever they can find and lose by 50 points if they're playing anybody of any significance, and otherwise go 2-10 like they do every year. I don't, and I can't imagine how many people are going to these games. Maybe they're rivaling. They're competing with the Florida State attendance there. I just can't imagine.
Yeah, according to Grapes in the comments section, UMass is headed to the MAC next season. So
okay, I knew they were headed to the MAC. I just didn't know if they made the move yet. But yeah, they're playing all these MAC games, and the cost of it. So I've not looked into this recently, but I know that I've read articles in the past about the football operation at a place like UMass and how much money it costs and how much money they're losing just for the supposed prestige of playing quote unquote big time college football.
Yeah, it's very interesting. But getting back to the act.
Yeah, and I can't imagine, I'm sorry to rail, I can't imagine anybody showing, it's not like when my daughter was looking at colleges, she had a thought, even though she's not a football fan, she's watched all of her football throughout her life with me, basically. But, she had a thought of, oh, I'd kind of like to go to a football school just for the event and the feel of, having a football school and getting fired up for the big game and going to a big game. So that crossed her mind, but so there's obviously an attraction, and it's been proven that big time football schools gain notoriety, a lot of prestige. It's the front porch of the program. It's the front porch of the university. It's the drawing card, and they actually gain a boost in enrollment because of having relevant football programs. But at UMass, I can't imagine there's one soul that goes to that school because they've got a football program, but they're going to lose a couple $1 million a year running a football program.
Okay. I didn't expect this much passion and energy about the Minutemen of UMass, but
yeah, that got me revved up a little bit.
What do you think about the actual line of 18.5, though? I feel like Mississippi State has players that are much better than UMass. They should be able just to run the ball
Yeah,
every
you
play.
would think so. You would think over the course of a long 3.5 hour football game, it's only 3 touchdowns. You would think that Mississippi State would, especially after you get beat up running around the SEC, going from Texas to Georgia to on and on and on, that you would be like, you know what? Let's go have some fun this week and beat the hell out of these guys and win a game 50-3. Let's have some fun, man. I'm a wide receiver who's had to face some of the best cornerbacks in the country, and I get drilled every week, and our passing game sucks, and I've not been able to put up numbers. I want to go out there and catch 6 or 7 balls for 100 yards and a couple touchdowns. Let's do something here. I do notice that the starting quarterback, as we see on the screen there, Tyson Pumachow. Does anybody recognize that name? He was supposed to be the heir apparent at Clemson. He was the Clemson quarterback waiting in the wings at one point.
I guess he can safely say his career did not turn out the way he wanted it to go.
No. But he did guide a win over Wagner, I see there. Oh. So, yes. Yep. We're going to clip this conversation with you, Daryl, and title it, UMass breakdown, week 10 breakdown or something.
Maybe you can add a G5 channel to your list and start it with the UMass Minutemen. I'm sure it'll get tens and tens of views. But Mark, going on to games that actually people will watch. People will watch. A sneaky game to me is the Louisville at Clemson game. Clemson, that line is steadily moved down. It's only Clemson -10. I know a lot of people believe Clemson is a much improved football team from the beginning of the year, in which they got blasted by Georgia. But to me, Clemson hasn't proven themselves against a decent opponent yet. And to me, this is a benchmark game just to see if Clemson is kind of fraudulent based on the schedule they've played, or if they have actually improved. What do you think about this game?
Well, I think you're right. I made the comment to a caller last night that Clemson is maybe the only team in the country that has yet to play. They are one of the highest ranked teams, maybe the highest ranked team that has not played and won a game against anyone with a pulse, anyone any good. The best record team that they've defeated is Virginia, who's 4-4. I do tend to believe that Clemson has a substantially better defense than Louisville and a reasonably on par offense with Louisville, who scored 45 points against Miami their last time out. That I'm thinking that Vegas is doing a nice job of selecting these lines this week. I wish I really would have jumped on when, we have that thought, and you've made the comment a couple times just in this phone call, that if Vegas has an outlier, a point spread that hits you kind of curiously, it's always been my thought as well that they must know something, because this is hitting me as this doesn't make any sense, but they must know something. And it's, without keeping track, seemed to come through that way. Although I would say this season, the times that I've felt that way, sure enough, I was right, Vegas was wrong. Case in point, last week, BYU and UCF. BYU's a fringe top 10 team. They played extremely well. They're undefeated, all of that. UCF's a bit of a mess. They're playing with Jakari Brown at quarterback, who's pretty awful. And they're a 2.5-point favorite. I know they're at home. And that hit me as, are you kidding me? And yeah, it came out as, are you kidding me? It was a blowout, and BYU took care of business easily. The point spread that hits me that way this week, Vandy getting 7.5 against Auburn.
Yeah, Uncle Lou has mentioned the same thing on his betting show, that line makes no logical sense to him because he's seen everybody take Vandy. And Vanderbilt has looked like the better football team, but I wonder if it's just a case of power ratings and they have some built-in thing at the beginning of the season, or they're just evaluating the talent on Vanderbilt's roster and saying it's so insignificant that no matter what they've done up to this point, they would still be underdogs to anybody except for like a Mississippi State type team.
I get that in week 3 or week 4, but we're at a point where they've beaten Virginia Tech, Kentucky, Alabama. They've hung with Texas down to the last minute of the game, and Missouri. This is 5 or 6 performances out of Vandy that are legitimate. They're a good football team.
Yeah, and it's a shame to me because I think they lose this game. I find it hard that they're going to go bowling if you look at the remainder of their schedule. And to me, we need to change the bowling system to where teams, it's based on schedules and stuff as well, and not just a hard threshold. Because I would much rather see Vanderbilt in there than Georgia Southern or some other irrelevant.
You're going to change that too.
We might as well. We're changing everything else. I mean, more people would watch Vanderbilt this year than some irrelevant MAC team.
I would.
Yeah, I know. Well, you're special, Mark. You're a hardcore college football fan. I'm just talking about the casual audience. The final game I'll mention, because SEC football keeps needling me in the comment section about it, is the Kentucky-Tennessee game. Mark, I'm expecting an absolute beatdown by my Kentucky Wildcats. We'll probably lose 45-3 type game. Basically, everybody that's good on defense for Kentucky is out for this game. So I'm honestly surprised the number is only 17.5. Like, it might be 14-0 at the end of the first quarter and just goes completely sideways. How does Kentucky keep this game close? How do we not even win, just keep it close, like 2 touchdowns?
Well, I doubt if Vegas is completely on top of the injuries, because they tend to move lines if there's a quarterback injury or a superstar injury, and that's ever so slight. So I doubt if they're really into it that deep. Not that they're not aware. They certainly have more information than anybody, and for good reason, but I don't think that's moving a line. Well, you got to consider Tennessee was taken to overtime by Florida. They lost to Arkansas. When's the last time Kentucky played a decent game?
Georgia.
So since then, they basically lost everybody.
Yep.
They're what, 3-5?
Yep.
Wow. Who's left? Tennessee.
Murray State, Texas, Louisville.
4-8.
That's why I said Mark Stoops is probably going to get fired, Mark.
Yeah. No, I thought you made a great call a couple of weeks ago when you said, hey, he's done a great job and we're in a better place today, but we're looking at about 4 seasons where it's just leveled off and now it's going the other way.
Right. Mike Ford put something, makes the Ole Miss game head scratching. Listen, I don't understand the love for Ole Miss football, okay? Ole Miss has proven they're not a good football team. They've proven more to me that they're not good than they are good. I know they beat up on everybody like 70-0 in the preseason, quote unquote preseason games. And they competed against LSU, whose defense doesn't look good at all. But other than just their preseason expectations of making a playoff and them investing in this roster and hyping it up, I see more evidence that Ole Miss is an 8-4, 7-5 type team than a playoff type team this year.
Well, I would say that they are 2 plays away from being undefeated as well.
I mean, that's very true, Mark, but in football, that's the way it goes sometimes. I mean,
I know that's the way it goes, but they are still in the playoff race. And they get Georgia at home. I don't expect them to win that game. I get it. But they're a really good football team. Now, I would have liked to have seen them play somebody decent outside the conference. That would have been nice. But and LSU's no great football team, and Kentucky certainly isn't. I don't know what happened there. I watched the game and thought Kentucky was a better team at that point than they are now. No, I get it. Ole Miss, they're a team that has yet to prove anything against anyone. You could put them in the same class as Clemson in regards to, have they beaten any good teams? best team Ole Miss has beaten? South Carolina, I guess.
Yeah, not even close. It's South Carolina, Wake Forest.
Okay, yeah, there you go. South Carolina.
And then Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Which Oklahoma, you were talking about extreme teams. Oklahoma, by far, is just completely falling off the face of the earth, and they're playing like one of the worst teams in the SEC. I didn't expect them to be this bad. I expected them to at least go bowling this year, but there's a realistic chance they don't even go bowling this year.
Yeah, they're a terrible team overall. The offense is hideous. Jackson Arnold got off to a horrendous start. He came back. He played pretty well last weekend against Ole Miss. They played pretty well against Ole Miss. They had a lead at halftime. They're not an awful team. They could go play in other conferences and play a bit better. You know, it would be funny to see Oklahoma play in the Big 12. Had they not moved this year, I don't know what they'd be doing in the Big 12 right now. They might be hanging in there.
Right, but this harkens back to our argument that was on the Sunday show between Indiana and Vanderbilt. Which one's better? Would you rather be the 5-2 team with an impressive loss, or would you rather be the 8-0 team that really hasn't played anybody elite, but is just blowing everybody out?
Oh, I'd rather be the 8-0 team, but I was making the argument about Vandy, and I don't know where all that started. I dropped in on the show and I heard all this love for Indiana, and rightfully so, but I was just trying to point out that they haven't played anyone. And then look at this Vandy team and look at what they're doing. They really got my attention last week against Texas.
Oh, yeah, for them to do it back-to-back elite teams they've played and off the high in order for them to stabilize it and look like the better football team throughout portions of that game, very impressive. Very impressive, Mark. They're a legit top 20, top 15 football team in the country, power rating wise.
Yeah,
I know they lost
a string of teams that are better than anyone that Indiana's played.
Correct. And that's not to insult Jeffrey or them, because I know, this is the most success they've seen in forever, but I'm still not sold that Indiana football is even going to go to the Big Ten title game. And I was telling Jeffrey today that I don't believe an 11-1 Indiana team is guaranteed to go to the college football playoff. Because what if they lose to Ohio State 49-3, 63-0, and they're just exposed as a fraud? Do I believe they should go to the college football playoff? Absolutely. Do they have the resume to go there? Yes. But will the committee put them in there? I don't believe so.
No. 11-1?
Yes. I think there is a chance the committee will not put an 11-1 Indiana team in the college football playoff. I believe that is a possibility. Well, if they get absolutely roaded.
Knowing you've drawn up the scenario. You've drawn up some kind of scenario to put enough teams in front of them.
Well, you will have to have a bunch of 2-loss teams in the SEC get put over them, which would be, you'll probably need Tennessee to beat Georgia. You would need Texas A&M to beat Texas. So those two would probably 2-loss teams get picked over Indiana. You have the 3 unbeatens from the ACC all get picked over. And then you would have the 2 from the Big 12. And then you have two G5 teams that are debatable in Army, Boise State, and Notre Dame, depending on how that Army-Notre Dame game shakes out. So that's 9 or 10 right there. And then the Big Ten, you got Oregon State, Penn State, and Ohio State.
Yeah, so think about this. And for people that enjoy scenarios and also enjoy the probabilities and the mathematics involved, think about this. During the 10-year run of the college football playoff, of the 4-team playoff, as I've said a zillion times here, I'm sure other people have run the models as well, but I've run them here, of course, produced videos to lay it out to say, what would a 12-team playoff look like the last 10 years? And there is a clear delineation, like it's perfect. 10-2, you're in. 9-3, you're out. You couldn't make it any clearer. It is a perfect dividing line. Now we arrive at this season, and I am now fascinated to see whether some of the scenarios we're discussing play out where an 11-1, not just a 10-2, an 11-1 team that had Ohio State and Michigan and maybe a few other decent teams on its schedule could miss the playoffs, and maybe a 9-3 make the playoffs, or just to see an 11-1. Again, let's just get back to that. An 11-1 miss the playoffs when a 10-2 would have never missed the playoffs from 2014 through 23.
Right. And I think the reason you got that clear cutoff is just the committee. Honestly, they only cared about the top 4 teams because that's what everybody was focusing on.
Yeah.
So I think there was an element of laziness and just, what's the most easily defensible position we can put? Well, just go by record. And I think, what is the path of least resistance for the playoff committee to make everybody happy? Well, at the end of the season, you've got this Indiana team who nobody really believes in. If you look at the AP poll, you look at the way people talk about them, and then they just get absolutely boat raced by the best team they've played all season by far, and them having no proven wins, no quality wins compared to everybody else they're compared against. I think that's the path of least resistance for the playoff committee.
Okay, we've got a few comments here. So in particular, Mike Fort is saying that beating Nebraska 56-7 is a great win. Let me modify that statement just slightly. Beating Nebraska 56-7 is a great win for Indiana. It's a great win for Indiana. It's not a great win. It's an impressive win. It's something that if you're one of the best teams in the country, that not that you should be expected to beat Nebraska by 7 touchdowns, but it's not a feather in your hat. Nebraska's not a very good football team with a not very good offense. And obviously the retort to that is going to be, well, they took Ohio State to the wire. I get that. There are one-offs. But in total, that's a good win. Yes, for Indiana, that's a great win. They're all great wins. All their wins against the Power Four, because they played nobody non-conference, against the Big Ten are great wins because they're Indiana. But that's not a great win. That's not like a playoff resume win. That's what we're talking about here. We're talking about Indiana making the playoff, and beating Nebraska 107-7 is not a playoff resume win. It's just not. And then somebody else, I've lost track, said something else in response to that. But anyway, so just to clear that up, that's where I stand on that. Yes, Indiana, I am not dogging Indiana. What they've done this year is remarkable. I've lauded them for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. I've got them ranked number 3 in the country. They're not the 3rd best team in the country. I've got them ranked number 3 in the country. But they, when they handle business the next 2 weeks against Michigan State and Michigan, that's going to continue to gain my respect. Even if they just win those games, just win them by 1 point, that's going to gain my respect. Neither one of those teams is that good, but it's going to gain my respect that they're continuing to be consistent. That's the one thing I will say. They've been the most consistent team in the Big Ten. They have not played a bad game. And then, of course, when they go to Columbus and play Ohio State, that's going to be a testing ground game.
Yeah, that's their only game of the schedule that's actually got any meat on the bone. Also, another factor the committee could take is if you look at Indiana's non-conference schedule this year, it was completely atrocious. Probably by far one of the worst non-conference schedules if you're going to look at a playoff resume team playing FIU, Western Illinois, and Charlotte. I think the committee could also logically argue that Indiana's record is bolstered by them not playing anyone of any consequence at all in the non-conference schedule.
Yeah, that's a legitimate point, and it should be noted here. Let's look at it. And again, this is Indiana football. They're probably not thinking about making a college football playoff, but this is where they are right now. And no team in the Big Ten or in a power conference should be playing FIU, Western Illinois, and Charlotte. That's pathetic. It's pathetic.
Mike Ford fired up in the chat.
That's the best word I can come up with for it. It's pathetic. It's pathetic.
Yeah. And you just look at the rest of their schedule. Nebraska's probably going to end up 7-5, 6-6. And then you got Michigan, that's probably 7-5, 6-6 type team as well. And Washington in the same boat. And they've just beaten nobody that's any good at all.
Yeah, their best win is either Nebraska or Washington, and they're the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, wherever you want to put them, teams in the Big Ten. That's where they are right now. And again, we are not, at least I'm not, raining on Indiana's parade. We are elevating them to playoff contending status and evaluating their schedule. If we're just talking about Indiana improvement, exceptional, remarkable. Kurt Cignetti, if he goes 10-2 this year, most likely going to get my push for Coach of the Year. Not that I think about such things, but that's a different argument. How much they've improved, but being a playoff team, yeah. If it plays out that they go 11-1 and lose to Ohio State, they're going to have a best win against a Nebraska or Michigan team at 7-5. Because Michigan, if they lose on Saturday to Oregon, if Michigan loses to Oregon on Saturday and loses to Indiana, then they're at best 7-5. So yeah, there are going to be no good wins unless they beat Ohio. If they beat Ohio State, then there you go.
Well, I'll even take it a step closer. I think all they have to do is be competitive and show they can compete on the football field with them. My scenario involves the not national championship game, but the Big Ten title game against them in Wisconsin, in which Wisconsin from the first play of the game didn't look like they belonged on the football field. I'm talking about that type of result where everybody in the entire world knows not only can Ohio State dominate this team, but there's about a list of 15 to 20 teams we also believe would dominate this team. And the only reason they're at this level is because of schedule. And also, I believe if Indiana gets into the playoff, we're setting a somewhat dangerous precedent here that it doesn't matter who you schedule in non-conference play. All you're doing is trying to meet this magical number. And once you meet this magical number, then you're all good. So anybody who wants to see these titanic out-of-conference matchups, why play them? Because if Alabama, let's say, I know they beat Wisconsin this year, or Texas A&M's a better team. Somebody said Texas A&M. Texas A&M lost to Notre Dame. What if they played Georgia Southern and beat them? And then it would be the exact same thing. We just can't have that. We have to have teams play against good teams, and we need to reward the teams that losing to get into the playoff spot. Because you can lose 2 or 3 games and still be one of the 12 best teams in the country. We shouldn't have these cupcake teams, no offense to Indiana, but these marshmallow schedules be in the playoffs, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's not their fault.
Oh, it's not. They're a great story and a great team. It just unfortunately went down this way. I'm mainly picking on the non-conference schedule because it's something they could have controlled.
They control that. Now, Ohio State didn't play anyone non-conference either. Their non-conference schedule is atrocious too, and it's pathetic. But I don't get on them for this one reason. I normally would. People are probably saying, well, we know why you're not getting on Ohio State. No, I have gotten on them in the past when they played a lousy non-conference schedule. I forget what year that was that they didn't play anyone. I think it was 2019. They only played Cincinnati, who was actually pretty good. It's because Washington joined the conference. That's why Ohio State has an easy non-conference schedule because they had Washington scheduled, but they had to change that game. So anyway, but Ohio State, if you're just judging it, which we shouldn't judge it on intent. We should judge it on this is what it is. And the intent of Indiana was to schedule the 3 easiest games they could find non-conference. That was their intent. And therefore, they should pay the price for it if they cannot navigate this schedule and be ultra impressive against it. But, they can't control the Big Ten schedule. The difference between them and, let's say, Ohio State is Ohio State in the throes of having that lousy non-conference schedule plays Oregon and Penn State in addition to the Indiana game now as well. So
correct.
Indiana
but also,
did not get those opportunities.
Right. Also, if you're Ohio State, you ran the risk this year and next year if you had some funky way of scheduling of your team being in this same position. That's also a downside. Now, luckily, Ohio State isn't in this position because they see the schedule. They play Penn State, Oregon, and figure they're probably good. But if I was Indiana, I was looking at this schedule, the only team I would think for certain was going to be any good was Ohio State, because we all suspected Washington to take a step back, Michigan to take a step back. Now, I don't think we suspected them to take this much of a step back, but, it's part of it. They chose to go the safe passive route, and I think they should get burned for it. And I know Mike Ford and those type of Big Ten homers are upset that I'm trying to leave an 11-1 team out of the playoffs. I'm just trying to see what we value. Do we value just getting to an arbitrary number in the wins department, or do we value playing elite competition? Because if we just value getting to an arbitrary number, there's no reason for Georgia to play Clemson. There's no reason for Alabama to play Wisconsin. There's no reason for any of these titanic matchups because everybody should be playing your cupcake FCS teams, 2 or 3 of them. Get your wins up as many as you can, and everybody try to get for 10 wins.
That is all very true. So, Indiana, we will see if this comes to roost. So you're saying that if they go 11-1 and play competitive against Ohio State, then this whole argument you're making is out the window.
Correct.
Okay.
I'm talking about if they get completely blown off the field. 49-0, 63-3, that type of a situation. Because as much as for the committee says they've mentioned in the past they don't look at the games, I believe the quality of context matters. And I believe how you look on the football field determines a large factor in this.
It does.
Yeah, run it by Jeffrey.
The committee.
Yeah, exactly, as it should as well. But I would love to see you run this by Jeffrey to see what his thoughts are on 11-1 Indiana being left out of the playoffs.
Because in all my conversations with Jeffrey, not to speak for him, but he is certainly in your boat of approach to the best records aren't always the selections to be made. We got to look at the quality of the teams. That's what he's always said to me.
Which is why I'd be curious, because now we're involving his team in this situation. I wonder if his fandom's going to get in the way of it in this argument. And I would like to see the defense he's able to craft up, because I think a large reason he believes Kirk Cignetti should get Coach of the Year. In my opinion, he would say an 11-1 Indiana would make the college football playoff is because it's Indiana, and he's a very knowledgeable college football fan. So I'd love to see his defense for this argument.
Well, I think the average person who knows the way the college football playoff is structured and what would have made a playoff in the past would automatically say anybody is going to go to the playoff out of the Big Ten or the SEC at 11-1, just without thinking about even needing to. We thought that we would have to dissect the teams that are 9-3 or maybe the 10-2 teams and dissect their schedules to see if they're worthy, but not an 11-1 team. But this is making total sense. Who else would be in the playoff that would have their best win be Nebraska or Michigan, a 7-5 team? Nobody.
I doubt anybody.
Yeah.
I doubt anybody. You might have to go to the Big 12 second team, or I hate to say it, but even SMU in their loss to BYU to me has shown more than what Indiana has shown because BYU's well, I mean, I don't know, but I think SMU or the second Big 12 team is probably where the argument would be in that conversation.
Yeah, I don't see an outcome where we don't have some great debates about all of this. I don't know that we're going to get the total train wreck that I'm hoping for with these three teams in the ACC finishing perfect in the conference and BYU and Iowa State getting to a championship game where the loser still only has one loss and maybe a four-way tie in the SEC with a lot of two-loss teams being compared to 2 and 3 loss teams in the SEC being compared to one-loss teams in the ACC and the Big 12. That's going to make for a lot of fun.
Oh, yes, it will. It'll make for great content for you and everybody in the channel. I didn't realize my Indiana take would needle so many people. I thought, I just figured this is Indiana football. Nobody cares about them, but you got a lot of Big Ten support for Indiana tonight, Mark. So
we do.
Yeah, it's good. Good to talk to you, Mark. Thank you for having me on this long. Greatly appreciated.
As always, sir.
Yeah, looking forward to see Boise State and see if Ashton Jeanty can run for over 189.5 yards today.
All right. Okay, so what we're seeing here is we appreciate about 1,300 votes on this one that I posted this week. Biggest surprise so far in college football in 2024. And of course, we could only post 4 possible responses. Otherwise, we would have included some others, maybe SMU, maybe Pitt, maybe on the downside. Who else? Who would be on the downside? Oklahoma, possibly. But we only had 4 slots to fill. So we've got the Florida State collapse, which when is the last time a team that the season before was 13-1 or anything in that range and was in national championship contention dropped to a probable 2-10, maybe a 3-9 team? The Auburn post Cam Newton team went from national champions to no. Okay, the Auburn team, what they did was they went from 3-9 the previous season to national champions, and then they dropped off to 7-5, 8-5 with a bowl win. So they didn't have that kind of drop off. They emerged from 3-9 to a national championship team. Of course, the LSU team in 2019, the COVID year, they went 5-5. They lost a bowl game. They went 5-6 the next season. Who else do we have out there that took that kind of plummet the next year? And TCU went from national championship game to 5-7. Good call. Anybody else out there? Can't really come up with anyone. So anyway, big plummet by Florida State, of course. I picked them 9-3 myself. Texas A&M undefeated in the SEC. That's impressive, but they've only played 5 games. They still have to get through 3 more games. They've beaten a few decent teams. Arkansas, LSU, Missouri, decent teams, pretty good teams. So that to me, yeah, I was scraping for that 4th one. I threw that in there just to kind of balance it out. But the Indiana and BYU, to me, Indiana far and away is the selection here as the most surprising team in college football this season. We've got no games kicking off past 8 p.m., which works well for me because, of course, after the primetime games, we will be here to take your calls And of course, we'll do an instant analysis of a couple primetime games. And then we will be on here live with you. And usually we've got college football going on, but the last game kicks off at 8 p.m. Eastern. Nobody on the West Coast, nobody in Hawaii, nothing. Look at that. That doesn't happen often. Which leads me to college football scheduling. I was going to hit on this tonight just because I saw, again, like last weekend, lousy Thursday and Friday games. Lousy Thursday and Friday games. That's because the conferences and the teams are scheduling themselves. If we had a commissioner, I would be up for the job. I wouldn't want to be the commissioner for the next 10 years, but I would do it for about 3 years. We would not have this horrendous scheduling in college football. There is no reason, especially since the World Series is over and there's no NFL on Friday night, that there can't be a substantial college football game on Friday night. There should be. Why should the sport not be highlighting itself on a Friday night? And to the powers that be or the people that love high school football, I don't care about high school football. I think it's great. I think it should be, it's Americana, and the people that love high school football should be going out to high school football games. I never agreed with this, stay off a Friday night because people go to high school football. Well, go to your high school football game. If that's what you want to see, then go to the high school football game. We live in the age of technology, for one thing. You can watch another game in your lap, or you can come home and it's 10:30 at night and you can whip through the college football game on the air. You can make decisions. We have disposable technology, and we've got all of this at our fingertips. So I don't agree with the college football shouldn't play on Friday night. No, college football games should be played at any time that they can take advantage of the landscape of the television schedule and the sports schedule. And yes, so Friday night college football, there should be some games. Never mind me. There we go. I'm pissed that there's no Friday night football game on Fox. Not all of us can afford cable. I thought Fox I didn't dissect the schedule. I thought when they made that announcement about Friday night football that I heard some stat that 2 of the games were going to be Big 12 games and the rest were Big 10 games. I know that Iowa's playing UCLA, I believe, next Friday night. I thought that they were going to have a game for us every Friday night. I don't know why they wouldn't tonight. And again, maybe they were anticipating a World Series game because Fox, of course, had the World Series, but of course that was wrapped up by the Yankees botching play after play after play after play. All right, good stuff. Well, we do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Thanks for stopping by. And we will be back with all sorts of instant analysis and so forth throughout the day on Saturday. And of course, we'll have the Ole Miss postgame show right here. But again, instant analysis with me and the call-in show on Saturday night after all the ball games. We will see you on Saturday.